How's everyone doing? Throw up your guests for whoever said no one surrenders here, damn it. So we're going to talk about a revolutionary. Ivan's going to be joining me. He's going to be in the box. And he's actually going to be doing most of the talking. Yes, this is Ghost of the Revolution. We're talking about a revolutionary. All right, Maoist got it. Okay, so yes, so we are going to talk about Juan Almeida Bosque. And the first thing I wanted to ask Ivan is, why did you choose to speak about Juan Almeida Bosque?
So I wanted to pick Juan in particular because there's so many people who, like, we know the obvious characters in the stories and history. Everyone knows Lenin, Stalin, even Trotsky, all those guys. But, like, I think a lot of TikTok communists, as I've always say this in every re-ed, have a misconception that like basically like these giant moments of history were essentially led by these particular great men in history. And I'm not saying that Juan in his own right wasn't a great man, but that there are so many people that are required to make a revolution happen. And because here we are in the West, where so much information is suppressed, we lose out on a lot of information of major characters who led enormous change throughout history. And I picked Juan in particular as well because even though there isn't a lot of Western information about him, some of the stuff that is about him, I think, really humanizes him that we don't really get about other characters in the revolutionary struggle. And I think it's important that we share that. And I also picked Juan because Juan is a black man and is also Latino or Hispanic or whatever you want to say in the Latin American diaspora. So I thought that would be interesting to talk about that particular dichotomy because, as a, Chicano indigenous person, back in Guatemala and all Central America, we see a lot of internal racism between people who identify as black, people who identify as indigenous, without realizing that we're all basically in this hodgepodge because of slavery and colonization. Yeah. So I thought that would be interesting to touch on.
Yeah. I mean, so for the second time in a row, when I was preparing for the show, when I brought it up to you all that I wanted to do this, I had a nice list of about 30 different revolutionaries. I was like, this is the list. This is who we go off of. And I did not have Amin on it, and I did not have Bosque or Almeida on it. So you guys just kind of threw it. I was like, you know what? It's really good because, the lists I made are people that I know of. So I'm doing this and learning as I'm doing it. And that, how I love learning stuff. So I've learned, I had mentioned to you that, I knew the name, right? And then as I started reading some stuff on him, I was like, I knew there was a composer. I knew there was someone that wrote music that was part of the Cuban Revolution. But when you gave me his name, it did not hit right away. And I was like, that is so neat because, I have a thing about, the art of the revolution and, all that stuff. So I think that stuff is important too. And we'll get to that at the end of it and talk a little bit about that. But so we wanted to start. I wanted you to do just a little history, prior to the Cuban Revolution. So, if you want to start with where you want to start.
Sure. So, going back to basically where it all went wrong, we know that European countries had been colonizing and settling all over the Western Hemisphere. And the Spanish Empire in particular had colonized Cuba. So Cuba for, I think it's fair to say, a few hundred years was subjugated by the Spanish Empire. The Spanish, when they participated in the slave trade, they would bring slaves from Africa and import them into Cuba, where they would work, the plantations, sugar plantations, very similar to U.S. chattel slavery. So that went on essentially uninterrupted for, a few hundred years until eventually what happened was as the United States began to gain more power in the world, and it was no longer a fledgling settler colony, but an actual force to be reckoned with, the United States found itself in a war with Spain, which was the Spanish-American War. They fostered a false flag attack. They ended up, I think it was like a 2-year war or something like that, that occurred, funny enough, not just in the Caribbean, but it also occurred in Asia and the Philippines. So we're, at this time period, we're starting to see more, conflict is not isolated to one place, single places in the world, which is, the consequence of empire. So basically, in 1898, the Spanish-American War ends, and Cuba, as terms for the end of the war, Cuba basically becomes a protectorate of the United States. It's occupied for a number of years, and then it's given back to regular administration by the Cuban people. But as we all know, any colony in the United States is never handed its actual independence. It's simply given, in its own title. So basically, starting in the beginning of the last century, we have Cuba's first president was a person named Tomás Estrada Palma. And he ruled the country basically from 1902 to 1906. This was pretty much like the least corrupt period of the Cuba's self-administration.
Was he picked by? He was picked by the U.S. or was he elected?
So Tomás was actually elected. But that, very quickly doesn't, last. But yeah, it was generally regarded as like within the last century, the least, corrupt time during Cuba's, what the hell is Cuba's history. So here we go. So basically, so Tomás was elected because I have here that essentially, he was doing things that all, good-hearted Latin American boys in charge try to do, land reform and, rooting out corruption and stuff like that. So eventually he was disposed by the United States, where the United States put in a new administrator named Charles Edward Magoon. Magoon is a crazy name. But yeah, he was the American diplomat, and he was basically in charge of the country until the country's power was eventually given back to the Cubans in 1909. Who was then led by Jose Miguel Gomez. So basically, during the Magoon period, all that that the corruption that was being stemmed basically blew up, and it only gets worse and worse from here. And what I mean by corruption, so yes, Dave, Magoon. So basically, what do I mean by corruption? So like in any capitalist system, in any sort of called free market system, you have people who capitalism is designed for people to win by any means necessary. So you have people here, especially at the time when there isn't so much oversight, for people to do basically whatever they want. So, people were making backroom deals. People were basically, taking money off the top, selling their own products, taking stuff off the line, stuff like that. Bribery, all that kind of stuff. And I see my friends from Australia are here. Shout out to y'all.
I know.
All right, here we go. So basically what I have here. So by 1909, Jose Miguel Gomez, during the Magoon period, corruption was left unchecked, although not condoned by the administration, which is important because there's the same thing we have here in the States today, where we don't condone corruption, but we're definitely corrupt. So Magoon's government official offered large contracts to the United States. Yeah, so basically, with the United States having their own boy in charge, they were basically giving U.S. companies like the top contracts for like sugar imports, anything, mainly sugar. Sugar is like the thing in Cuba.
Sugar is yeah.
So by 1921 and 1925, this was considered the top of peak corruption. There was a president at the time. His name was Alfredo Zayas. I don't have too much about him at all. He was then taken over by a guy named Dorito Manchuro. He initially had a lot of support, but then, a lot of unrest came, and then, rioting and violence and whatever. He was eventually replaced by a guy named Carlos Manuel, who then eventually was subsequently couped by Fulgencio Batista.
Yeah.
So Fulgencio Batista, we've all heard, the name Batista from WWE and whatever. But basically, in the 40s, my fault. Fulgencio was the president for a time. He was considered very progressive. He was initially supported by the burgeoning communist parties, the Dem Sox and stuff in Cuba. He was very big on, the same kind of stuff like land reform, whatever. Eventually, he stepped down as president. Time goes on. He runs as president again in the 50s, but he doesn't win at all. Like he gets decimated in the election. And he took that personally. And because Fulgencio was a soldier at the time, he's some kind of officer, he basically led a military coup. And the coup was bloodless. It occurred in a single day. All Cuban soldiers and military officials gave control up to Fulgencio, and Batista basically ruled the country. Now, Batista is generally... what is the difference between the corruption of Batista led as compared to the ones in the past? Well, at the time, now it's the 50s, technology is getting crazy. World War II is over. Cold War is ramping up. The means of transporting goods and people is getting crazier. So what Batista does is basically he begins to make ties with organized crime in the United States, particularly the mafia in New York and New Jersey. Which I feel like is not talked about enough, but anyway. So a lot of these mafia guys were bringing their business, bringing their casinos, particularly their prostitution rings, any dirty money that they could run and clean, they were bringing it to Cuba. They were particularly bringing it to Havana. And the people of Cuba suffer for it because you have these giant American gangsters, which depending on the day are either backed by the U.S. government or they're not. So, this is when you really start to see the support from the Democratic Socialists and the Communists be removed from Batista because they're seeing that this dude is he's allowing the Americans to dominate the Cuban economy more so than they already have been. And
can I mention one little thing is that at this time there's a super connection between the CIA and the mafia too. So.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind.
I mean, Batista was so bad that even JFK was recognized that this guy had to go. He was especially with the ties, because that's the thing with the capitalists, right? Even though capitalists allow for mafia types, cartels, and syndicates to run amok, they're also running in competition. So when you have the mafia essentially having a country that they can run their own economy off of, it's presenting as a challenging force to the United States government. All right. So that's pretty much, that's the stage for the Cuban Revolution. So Juan Almeida was born in February 1927. He was born in Havana. There's not a heck of a lot known about him at the time when he was young. That's super common amongst anyone born in Latin America in the 1920s, 1980s. There's not very solid record keeping. So Juan basically he attended grade school. He was super into school, super into art. Really wanted to learn. Very smart guy, very smart kid. But like most kids who live in poverty within Latin America, he had to drop out of school and go to work. That's something my own parents had to do. So I have here that he dropped out around 11, so that would have been the equivalent of 8th grade for us, and he became a bricklayer. And I found here that was particularly interesting because Juan Almeida was black, and there was a lot of anti-blackness in Cuba at the time from all these corrupt governments and built into the structure of society. yes, Juan should not have been a laborer at 11, but, in his younger years, but he would never be able to hold the title of like a master bricklayer, no matter how good he got, because black people in Cuba at the time weren't allowed to do that. So, like we can see, I think that this is something that particularly liberals don't understand when they talk about countries in the so-called third world, is they think that they're very homogenous. They think that the race issues are very much tied only to the United States, but race issues are tied to colonization and the consequences of such. So we're skipping a couple years now because there's not a lot of information, but basically a little unclear whether Juan goes to Havana University or a different university in Cuba, but he might have worked at one of them. It's confusing. But basically, Juan goes to university, and this is where he meets both Fidel and Raul. Both of them, both Fidel and Almeida are studying to be a lawyer. And this is where he meets both of them, particularly Raul. He gets in a close relationship with him. They go to protests together. There's a lot of mutual respect. And basically, Raul and Fidel begin to explain to, Almeida that essentially what they're trying to do is, pursue legal avenues to basically take down the Batista regime. Which is particularly why they were studying to be a lawyer. So three of the gang, they basically joined what was called the Cuban Orthodox Party, which is when they began to sort of really like train both like legally and illegally to take down the Batista regime. So
I heard a little. I read a little thing that when Almeida met Castro, he had a Lenin book with him.
Oh, wow. Well, who did? Almeida or Fidel?
No, Almeida wasn't a communist yet. It was Castro was holding a book of V.I. Lenin.
There you go. Yeah. That's, this is the thing. This is real, like, you can see concrete, like, evidence, like, how the philosophy of Marxist-Leninism is so pervasive, especially in countries of black and brown people. So then we get a little bit more into some concrete information here. So in the Cuban Revolution basically kicks off because Fidel, through his legal means, is arguing against the Batista regime, and he basically gets shut down. I just got distracted by a comment. Yeah, so we upload these to our YouTube channel. You can see the link on the background. So basically what happens is they try to argue legal reasons as to why Batista's regime is illegitimate. Castro and the gang get shot down. So they decide, okay, there's no other option but violence at this point. So this culminates in in 1953 in a place called Santiago de Cuba. There is a place called Moncada Army Barracks, and basically the idea was that Fidel and his crew would attack the Moncada Barracks, and they would be able to take a large cache of weapons that they would then be able to distribute and basically cause the peasantry in the country to revolt. Now, my own criticisms here as a TikToker is that this probably wasn't the best idea. And they are incredibly lucky, as I'll explain in a second what happens next. So basically, the attack failed miserably. Castro, Almeida, and the other, what they call the Moncadists, fled to the Sierra Maestra Mountains to avoid capture. They attacked with a force of, I think it's less than 100 people, and they severely underestimated the military's response to the attack, and they basically got surrounded. They got pushed into the shelf of the mountain, and they hid there, for a few months until August 1st, where both Almeida and Castro and Raul actually were all caught in October, and they were all sentenced to prison for various amounts of time on a place called the Isle of Pines. So, thankfully for the revolution's sake, they only served prison time for about 18 months. And this is because
Yeah.
the country, the peasantry, the people, basically launched a legal campaign and protests to essentially have them taken away from prison to be freed. And shockingly, the Batista regime agreed, which was, much of the chagrin of the Batista regime, as you'll see.
Yeah.
So basically, what happens is after the Moncada barracks attack, the boys they leave the country. They go to Mexico, and funny enough, while they're in Mexico City is when they meet Che Guevara, because Che Guevara went to Mexico because Che, and this is near to my heart and my origin story. Che was in Guatemala City when the American coup against Guatemala occurred against the Virgin and Communist government. So there's all these ties, to these people in history, and then even to myself talking to you guys today. So, they meet up. The whole gang is there. They're like, all right, so we're going to do this. So they start training in Mexico. There's the number is disputed. It's between 78 and 82 other men. They train in Mexico. They buy a boat called the Ran Am, which you were saying was built in Brooklyn.
It was built in Brooklyn, New York. The grandma, yeah.
That again is just funny, all these connections, so they buy a yacht, basically, which is like the most anti-communist move, and I would love to see how TikTok would cancel them for buying a yacht. So they buy a yacht, and they set sail to basically land on the island and start another uprising. So the quote in the background, "No one here is surrendering," or no one surrenders here, damn it. So there's a couple different interpretations of it, but basically when they're on the gram, Fidel asks pretty much everybody, he's like, I hope you guys realize that we're about to get fucked up. Probably all or most of us are going to die. Basically, the whole boat falls silent. People are really contending with how they, what's about to happen. And then basically, Almeida says this, and everyone gets all riled up and ready to fight. Now, interestingly enough, this is disputed, where apparently it was a different revolutionary on the ship who said this. And I tried to find some information as to why that is, and I don't really find a lot. And I'm not saying this with any sort of concrete answer. So this is literally I'm just spitballing, but I do wonder if this is disputed because of Juan's skin color, because, society can never let black people have anything. So I don't know. It was just a thought. I would have to look more into it. But I find it interesting how that is particularly disputed amongst certain scholars. Take a sippy sip. So this organization that basically went on the ship to invade Cuba is different from the Moncadas. They were called the 26th of July movement in reference to the original attack on the Moncada barracks. So I have some stuff here from the interweb. It was a Cuban vanguard revolutionary organization and later a political party led by Fidel Castro. The movement's name commemorates the failed 1953 attack on the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba, part of the attempt to overthrow the dictator Fulgencio Batista. The 26th of July movement's name originated from the failed attack on Moncada barracks, an army facility in the city of Santiago de Cuba. The attack was led by young Fidel, who was legislative candidate in a free election that had been canceled by Batista. The attack had been intended as a rallying cry for the revolution. Castro was captured and sentenced to 15 years. We already got some of that. The original core of the group, organized around the attack on the Moncada barracks, merged with the National Revolutionary Movement led by Rafael Garcia Barcenia, with the majority of the Orthodox youth. Soon after, National Revolutionary Action led by Frank Peris would join because of the commonality in their ideology, their goal of wanting to topple the Batista regime. The M26-7 would quickly add more young people from diverse political backgrounds. Castro sought to frame the movement as a direct continuation of the anti-colonial struggle of the 10 Years' War and the War of Independence, which is very much the case. When the Latin American Wars for Independence occurred, a lot of these these governments were basically handed to compradors, to natives, in this case, natives of nations who would basically just answer to the colonial handlers. So,
Yes.
Even if you look like me, but you answer to Europe, you are a colonist. You're a colonizer.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
So, where are we here? Yep. So the attack, occurs. It basically sparks this, the revolution. Different groups. Sorry, I think I froze there.
Yeah.
Different groups from different regions of Cuba, different ideologies rise up, and it culminates into the revolution, to which eventually Batista flees the country on January 1st. I had it here. I want to make sure I got the year right. No, anyway, Batista leaves. So they win. So interestingly enough,
Yeah.
So Juan, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about him is Juan was also a music composer. And I really wanted to highlight this because I feel like and I'm guilty of it too, but we basically don't humanize communists like at all. Even as communists, we tend to again think that there's always ultra serious people. Thanks, comments 1959. We always think that these people were super ultra serious giga chads who never like smiled or did anything like poetic at all. But Juan was a music composer, and he wrote in his life over 300 different love songs. So he wrote this one song called La Lupe before he left Mexico to do the revolution. And there's a few different interpretations of this. There's the interpretation that he's referring to Guadalupe, as in the city, because of basically being welcomed by the Mexican people for being able to seek asylum and train there for years. It also has some implication about the Virgin Mary. Some people interpret this that he's also talking about an actual woman named Lupe. Who knows? Maybe the woman is Mexico after all. So I translated the lyrics, so I just wanted to read them because again I feel like we don't realize that these people were people. So the song translates to, so it's La Lupe. I'm leaving your land, pretty Mexican, kind and gentle. And I do it excitedly as if in it I left a piece of me. I'm leaving pretty Lupe, and I take with me a little ray of light that your eyes gave me. Virgin of Guadalupe, the afternoon I saw you. Swallow without nest, it was me on the road when I met you. You opened your chest for me and well felt love. I nestled in you. And now that I'm walking away, for duty to fulfill, that my land calls me to win or to die. Don't forget me, Lupita. Oh, remember me. Yeah, I don't know. You can find the song on YouTube. There's
I even tried to give a hint in the promo. I tried to give a hint because I played it in the background.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can find it on YouTube. There's actually a bunch of his songs up there.
Yeah. So he was a music writer. He's a poet. And that song, like I said, like Lumpy said, you can find it online. You can listen to it. I think it's a really nice song. Anyway, I just thought that was fun to share. Yeah. So we have some stuff here about. Okay, what's up?
Let's. Do you want to move on? Like now they won the revolution. Do you want to go through some of the stuff that he did after the revolution, or did you have something else you wanted to?
Yeah, so I got some stuff. I wrote a thing out here. Again, because information is a little bit more scarce, there's conversation about exactly what position Almeida held after the revolution. I see some stuff that says he was in a central committee. I see some stuff that he was in a National Assembly. I see he either became a commander or he became a general. So from what my understanding is that he did become part of the Central Committee, and he basically became the head of the armed forces, from what I'm understanding. Yes. From what I'm reading, it's not that he was necessarily he wasn't the top military guy during the war up until basically the march on Santiago, where basically he commanded essentially the entire army at that point. it wasn't until basically after the fact, after into like the Bay of Pigs invasion, for example, that Juan actually had like, you know, essentially the most military authority in the country. So I have some stuff here. Yeah. So because of his loyalty to Castro, as well as his military powers, Juan Almeida Bosque had been appointed to numerous high-ranking positions within both the revolutionary government and the Communist Party. Promoted to the rank of major as Batista left the country, Castro appointed Almeida to head the Cuban Air Force in June 1959, following the dismissal of Diaz-Lanez for insubordination. According to so that's basically what happens in Cuba. You know, he gets into these, you know, higher ranks and stuff, but kind of going back to America for an instance, I thought this was really interesting. So I think pretty much everybody has seen the footage, and if you haven't, there's footage. You can go on YouTube or search it up on TikTok of Fidel and his crew going to New York City and basically just like meeting with random people. And it's really cool because it's like it's colored footage and everything. And again, you can see these people, you know, being, you know, human. And it's interesting, right? Because Almeida goes with Fidel to New York, and they particularly Fidel and his crew went to, you know, Harlem. And it's interesting, right? Because you have to remember this entire time, you know, that we've been talking about Almeida is black, and, you know, who lives in Harlem? Mostly black New Yorkers. So I found a New York Times article that was criticizing Fidel. So it says this. So according to some writers of Afro-Cuban history, Fidel Castro cynically used Juan Almeida in the early 60s as a symbol of revolutionary government's committed endeavors to address and end racism and racial discrimination and segregation in Cuban society. These writers point to Castro's 1960 visit to New York City, where he addressed members of the United Nations, as proof. After Castro moved the Cuban delegation to a hotel located in Harlem, he urgently sent for Almeida, who was living in Santiago de Cuba. Upon his arrival, Castro proceeded to parade Almeida through the streets of Black Harlem. Almeida even dined with leaders of Black America. Some have claimed that Almeida's token presence in New York allowed Castro to strategically employ as a race fundamental element in Cuba's foreign policy as a way of enhancing Castro's status among members of non-aligned movements centered in Africa and Asia, as well as among leaders in African-American communities in the United States. Now, here's the thing, dog. That criticism is implying that race issues and relations aren't like real, because they're very real, especially in 1960s United States, and especially from Cuba. That went from a slave society to now a free society that is still undoing the discrimination and the segregation that was occurring in Cuba at the time. So the reason why Juan was so popular amongst the Cuban revolutionaries is because he was black. Not just because he was black, because he was an artist, but because he was a military expert, but because the people in Cuba who suffered the most, Afro-Cubans, saw somebody who was like them, who was leading revolutionary change. I mean, for me as a Hispanic, as a brown boy, like if I, you know, see people who look like me, that's why I'm talking about the guy, you know, it's inspiring. So,
and who's to say that Castro wasn't, you know, we were still in Jim Crow at that point. So maybe Castro was doing this on purpose, but I'm sure Almeida was like,
exactly. Like, yeah, it is strategic for sure. But it makes sense as to why he would have gained the popularity that he did. And it would make sense that when they go to New York, of all places, where they're trying to, influence the communist revolutionaries in the States to win an information war, to win a propaganda war, that, you would want your most successful black revolutionary from your country to go to New York. That doesn't, like, why would you not do that? So to me, that criticism is extremely telling, where they're like, it's very liberal. It's, you would see something like this today, where they're just using people of color to shove it in our faces, and it's like, but he was a person of color. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know. It's just not.
And it's not like crazy. He just picked him up somewhere. Like, he's been hanging out with this dude for like 10 years now. Decades, he's been in prison with him. He's been Right. It's too funny.
I don't think. I think Almeida could think for himself if he realized,
Yes.
could have realized that these people didn't actually like him for who he was. So nevertheless, it appears that within Cuba, Almeida had never been regarded as a token figure. In 1961, he became a member of the Integrated Revolutionary Organizations, a body that precedes the formation of the new Communist Party. He also served the president of, I don't know how to say this, so it's JUCEI, or the Board of Coordination and Inspection for Province of Las Villas. The government agency sought to convey the interests of power of workers and peasants at the local level. In 1966, he graduated from the Superior Academy of Officers for Revolutionary Armed Forces. Since 1965, Almeida had continuously served on the Politburo of the Communist Party, and in 1998, the Cuban state awarded him the honorary title of the Hero of the Republic of Cuba. Since 1993, he had served as president of the National Association of Combatants of the Cuban Revolution, and he represented the Cuban government as a nation before foreign dignitaries at home and abroad. As vice president of Cuba Council of State, Almeida had also become one of the most popular musicians and poets in Cuba. He has written over 300 songs and 60 or more poems. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have on my notes. I was going through, I went through the Internet Archive to go on the communist website, like the actual Cuba's website. I didn't really find like much of anything. I
have what Castro wrote upon his death.
Okay.
If you want me to read through that.
Yeah.
So he wrote, I had the privilege of knowing him, a young black militant worker who would become successfully the leader of his revolutionary cell, a combatant at, I'm going to say it wrong, Moncada. Moncada. This is why I wasn't going to do a lot of reading, because I butcher languages. A fellow prisoner, a platoon captain at the time of the Granma landing, an officer in the rebel army prevented from advancing by a bullet in his chest during the violent battle of Uvero. Did not know that. The commander of a column that marched on to create the Third Eastern Front, and a compañero, or compañero as I like to say it, sharing the leadership of our forces in the final successful battles that overthrew the tyranny. I was an exceptional witness to his exemplary conduct for over a half a century of heroic and victorious resistance in the struggle against the bandits, the Giron Bay of Pigs, the counteroffensive, the October 1962 missile crisis, our internationalist missions, and the resistance to the imperialist blockade. He defended principles of justice that will be defended at all times and during all periods, as long as human beings breathe on Earth. I thought that was nice.
No, it's very nice. It's beautiful. I think the Cuban Revolution and Fidel, they get such a bad rap. I mean, because they're communists, one, and they're the most successful communist movement on this side of the planet. And they are always criticized for their, racism, for their perceived racism, for their so-called, discrimination, amongst the black workers.
Yeah.
But, the reality is that in Cuban society, the majority of the population were Afro-Cubans, and they took to the revolution for a reason. After the revolution, Cuba sent troops to Angola for a reason, because it was a shared struggle.
Yes.
And there was revolutions occurring all over the world. Why do you think they picked, an African country? It's because it's rooted in their society. I don't know. It's just really interesting how much people just tear these people apart. But even in the future, we saw a lot of exiled Black Panthers, got asylum in Cuba.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, this is pretty much my take on this guy. I wish I had a book to recommend, because I really can't find stuff online. What do you have?
it's nearly impossible because like the books that he wrote a book. I mean he wrote a few books. He did speeches. Nothing is translated. Like it's near impossible to find any translations of his stuff, which is I hope maybe rectified soon. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up that I thought was pretty neat when I was reading about this, and it was the fact that like at one point he took over Raul's position for a year so Raul could go study, but it was after he had come back from studying. Like this is not something they would do in like politics. Like they don't really send people off for a year to study in governments, like capitalist bourgeois governments, you know what I mean? So like they were providing that, like the education on the end that he could not get because he had to leave school at 11 years old, you know what I mean? Right. So I thought that was pretty neat. The other thing is I do you want to read that one piece that I sent you? But I just want to just say, like, I really, like when, my eyes lit up, like I was like, oh, okay, we'll do him. And then when I was like, realized that he was the composer, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Because like,
which one did you send me a few?
The one from People's World that was Juan Almeida Bosque, A Hero with Music in His Soul.
All right, let me see.
Do you need me to send it again? It's from Radio Havana, Cuba. Yep. Okay. And so like I think that it's always important to, because the art of a revolution is the people's art. It's the people's music. It's the people's everything. You know what I mean? Like, so it's so important because it ties everything together. And so I think it's just beautiful that he's a composer. Plus, I just want to mention one thing that in the article he brings up son, S-O-N, and that's actually the cubano son. The son cubano is the genre of music and dance from Cuba. So
yeah,
go ahead.
So I'll read this. So Juan Almeida Bosque, A Hero with Music in His Soul, September 18, 2009, by Radio Havana, Cuba. So Havana. Cubans are mourning the death of a commander of the revolution, Juan Almeida Bosque. He is a legendary character in the history of the Cuban Revolution who always combined literature with music and gave us the possibility to know his sensibility to the world and life. The work of commander of the revolution, Juan Almeida Bosque, stands on top of the Cubans' popular music. His pieces, Dame un trajito, Give Me a Drink, Déjala que baile sola, Let Her Dance Alone, Estos Son, and Homenaje, I don't think I said that one right, quickly became hits among the lovers of songs and dancers. La Lupe stands out in Juan Almeida's compositions as one of the most popular and well-known songs he ever wrote, where he reflected deep-rooted love for a woman and his homeland. His repertoire encompassed over 500 songs in different genres. Others of Juan Almeida better-known songs are Este Camino Largo, This is a Long Road, or Mejor con... see, when you're dyslexic in two languages, it gets difficult. Conciliar. Mejor conciliar, or better part. Vuelve pronto, come back soon. Mejor diciembre, December is better. These are pieces of thorough writings and fine, expensive, and rhythmic shades. We should not omit his record, Elegy, where he pays tribute to the homeland of his founding fathers. The instrumentals, including pieces dedicated to Jose Martin and Major General Antonio Massino. You see, I just said E instead of and. And Ignacio Romante. Evocacion was dedicated to the Revolutionary Armed Forces as well as the homeland's victory. These pieces had a beautiful sound and high patriotic content. As for Juan Almeida's literacy work, he wrote several texts with his testimony of one of the main characters and unforgettable moments in Cuban history. These were titles like Contra el Agua y el Viento, Against Water and the Wind, winner of Casa de las Americas Award in 1885, La Unisad, Sin Unada, The Only Citizen, El General El Jefe, the General and the Boss, or the General and the Chief, Persido, Prison, Exilio, Exile, Desembarco, Landing, La Sierra, the Mountains, Por las Faldas de Toquino, Trekking, Turquino, Hillsides, Atención. Now I see why you want me to read this. Mi Cuento, Summary, La Sierra Maestra y las Más Ala, Sierra Maestro on the Yonder, and La Aurora de los Héroes, The Hero's Dawn. In addition, more than 50 of his poems were published at Bohemia magazine. Commander Almeida was born in Havana City on February 17, 1927. He joined the revolutionary struggle March 10th, 1952, in Havana University, where he met Fidel Castro Ruiz. Alongside him, he participated in the assault in Moncada garrison on July 26, 1953. He was subsequently apprehended and condemned to 10 years imprisonment in a penitentiary of the former island of Pines. After he was pardoned, he traveled to Mexico, where he joined the expedition on the Granamia, which landed in Las Coloradas in the southeastern former Orient province, December 2nd, 1956. He fought in several battles for the rebel army in Sierra Maestra and was promoted to the rank of commander of the Santiago de Cuba column on February 27, 1958. In March 1958, following Fidel's orders, he organized a third front of operations in the mountain range, where he would eventually call the Mario Molines Monterrey Third Eastern Front, and its main mission was keeping the pressure on Santiago de Cuba, the seat of the second most important garrison of Feliciano Batista's tyranny. After January 1st, 1959, he served in different posts for the Revolutionary Armed Forces and the Communist Party of the state. In the first Congress of the Cuban Communist Party, Juan Almeida Bosque was elected to the Central Committee and the Politics Bureau. He served as members of the National Assembly of the People's Power Parliament and Vice President of the Council of State. On February 27, 1998, he was conferred the honorary title of the Hero of the Republic of Cuba, and Maximo Gomez awarded it in its first degree. Many other medals and decorations were bestowed on him. As poet Robert Fernandez wrote in the foreword of one of his works, "Happy is the revolution whose heroes have music and words in their soul to preserve battles and endeavors and dreams."
No. No.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
Very nice.
sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I don't know. I like him.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on him?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I will get this up on YouTube tomorrow morning. Well, by noon Eastern Standard Time. So I will get this up if you missed any of it, or if you want to direct others to watch it. I think it's very important because there isn't a lot in English about him. And I'm kind of trying to encourage Ivan to maybe do a video essay, but we'll see. He has some stuff he's working on.
We'll see. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming out.
Yeah. Thank you. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Next week, we're off. So we will begin again in 2 weeks, and we are no longer doing the shows on Friday nights for now. They're on pause for now, and so we will be having some other things coming out really soon. So keep tuned. Night everyone, or afternoon, everyone. Bye.
Bye.